What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Week 17 waiver wire ads. I know most of you had your championship last week, but there are a few leagues out there that either have it this week or have 2-week championships in week 16 and week 17 combined, so I figured I'd make this video this week. Remember that I record this before the Monday night game, so if someone does go down, then just look for an update in the pinned comment that also has timestamps. Alright, let's start things off at running back with DeAndre Washington. We don't yet know the status of Josh Jacobs this week, but Washington should be 100% owned in the off chance that they hold Jacobs out again. He takes over Jacobs' full workload when he's out, so there's really no excuse for him still being on the waiver wire in as many leagues as he is. The big injury news this week was that both Chris Carson and Mark Ingram went down. Also big news that Derrick Henry was injured, but I'm talking about news that people got hurt in-game. So in-game, Carson goes down, Mark Ingram goes down. We are not expecting either of them to return in week 17. Our guy Justice Hill stepped in for 3 carries for 19 yards plus a touchdown, and then added 3 receptions for 32 yards on top of that. With the Ravens locking up the top seed this week, there is no way that Mark Ingram will be playing in week 17, even if he was able to. Gus Edwards is still the direct backup to Ingram, but Hill carries a little bit more upside since they'll use him in the receiving game, and it wouldn't be shocking if they choose to feature him next week, because let's say they view the Ingram injury as like a month-long injury. I mean, we just don't know enough information at this point. But if it's a bad injury, they're going to have to lean on Gus Edwards in the playoffs. So they definitely don't want to go out there and give Gus Edwards 25 carries, because if Ingram and Edwards were to get hurt, that really, really hurts what they want to do on offense. So Gus is still the backup, but I'd expect him to get more in that 10 to 12 carry range, and for them to use Justice Hill in a similar amount on the ground, but then more as well through the air. So that's how I view that situation. As for the Carson injury, I wouldn't do anything with that. Penny's out, Procise got hurt, so they're down to Travis Homer, who no one should be starting in their championship. Dion Lewis is also a guy I would not add. I ranked him, I wouldn't say low this week, but I think lower than a lot of people did, just because he does not fit the Titans system, and they just refuse to use him in the receiving game. It makes absolutely no sense, but the Titans coaching staff tried to just throw him in to exactly what they do with Derrick Henry, realized it didn't work, which they should have realized. I mean, before the game even started, they should have shifted their game plan to feature him more in the receiving game, but they didn't, and they're not going to because they just don't feel like it. So he's not a guy I would look at, and also it kind of looks like Derrick Henry's returning this week, so you obviously don't want Dion Lewis. For wide receiver, we got a few guys. Steven Sims Jr. was a name that I mentioned last week, and I'm probably biased towards him because of how much money he won me last week, but I just think the kid is really good, and he's clearly a guy they want to use moving forward. Part of me wants him to have a bad game this week, just so people don't hype him up next year, right? Because if he ends the season with 3 really good games and then he has a nice camp, he's going to get hyped up in drafts next year. But if he has a bad game here, maybe people just look at the touchdowns, think it's a fluke, and move on. If you're in a deeper league or a dynasty league or a keeper league, then I don't think he's a bad add. I thought he was a solid guy to add last week. Diontae Johnson is also a solid add. He has 8, 7, and 9 targets over the last 3 weeks, and he's turned that into 26, 9, and 22 fantasy points. Plus, he faces a Baltimore defense that's very good, but will likely be benching a lot of their starters for a good portion of the game. Maybe they open up with all the starters on defense, but there's no way they play the starters for the full game. So at least part of the week, he should be playing backups. Breshad Perriman is also out there in about 50% of leagues. Winston currently has the 19th most passing yards in a season ever, and he needs 570 next week to break the record. That's probably not going to happen. I'd say it's unlikely, not impossible. We know Winston's going to go for it right off the bat. But one thing, he needs 328 to pass Tom Brady's 2011 mark for third all time. So he's definitely going to shoot for that mark. He obviously knows that 570 is a little bit unrealistic, but 328 is well within his range of outcomes. So to finish third all time would be pretty cool. The only way I see Perriman not having 100 yards next week is if he gets hurt. So he should definitely be owned in more than half of leagues. Deebo Samuel is also out there in about half of leagues. You guys know that shouldn't be the case. I talk about him a ton. Especially if you're in a keeper league, I would definitely make sure to go out and get him. John Ross is the last wide receiver I'll go over. He was announced as a starter last week, and then they gave him 13 targets. They already locked up the number 1 seed, so, they can win this week and it won't even matter. So there's a chance they go out there and they test out John Ross. They know kind of what they have in a lot of the different pieces in the offense. They don't fully know what they have in Ross. He's been hurt for most of his short career. So getting one more game as a sample against Cleveland, no less, that's a pretty nice thing to have. So a good matchup. And if he's going to see, 12, 13 targets, you got to take note because he's definitely a big play threat on any of those. For tight end, I got 2 names for you. Dallas Goedert is the tight end 10 on the season, yet he's available in over 55% of leagues. I know that Ertz injured his ribs last week, and maybe you're like, oh my goodness, is this the greatest ad ever? I expect Ertz to play in week 17, so no, you're not getting just like the perfect scenario, especially in a must-win game. He's going to go out there, but even if Ertz were to play, if he doesn't play, then oh my goodness, Goddard's probably like a top 5, top 3 tight end. But even if Ertz does play, he should be closer to 80% owned than 43%. And then I'm honestly embarrassed to announce that 55% of you play in a league where Tyler Higbee is still a free agent. If he is available in your league and you did not win the championship, then I don't know what to tell you. He's got at least 7 receptions in 4 consecutive games and over 100 yards in all of those 4, and he takes on the Arizona Cardinals this week. So if he's a free agent in your league, you should be embarrassed. For quarterback streamers, we got a few options. The top play is Jared Goff versus the Cardinals. Just went over that matchup. Wilson did have a bad game against them this week, but that's more of an outlier. They're still a bad defense, so look for Goff to have a pretty nice game. Baker gets to play the Bengals. He's been horrendous this season, but there's nothing that a trip to Cincy can't fix. If you used Dalton last week, then you can definitely use him again this week against Cleveland. Not as good of a matchup, and I definitely wouldn't say that this game is just a lock to shoot out because the 2 quarterbacks are Baker and Dalton. So if it was a 17-10 game, no one would be surprised. But both of these teams have bad defenses, so there's definitely a chance that the offenses go back and forth. If you're feeling real good, then Drew Lock is viable in deeper formats. They've been letting him throw the ball a lot, and the Raiders are one of the best possible matchups for the passing game. Not a play I'd ever make in a 12-team single quarterback league, but certainly viable in 16-team leagues or in 2 quarterback formats. Speaking of that game, you can certainly stream the Broncos defense at home against the Raiders. They've had at least 3 sacks in 4 consecutive weeks, and the Raiders' offensive line is a little banged up right now, and Derek Carr is certainly not immune to falling apart. The top option for defense streamers is absolutely the Chiefs. I genuinely don't understand how they're only 40% owned. They're averaging 14.5 points per game over their last 4, and they've allowed less than 10 points per game over their last 5. This week, they get a home matchup with the Chargers. I haven't done the rankings yet, but I expect them to be a top 5 defense this week. If you can't get them, then just add the Falcons at Tampa Bay for pretty obvious reasons. Winston has roughly 200 turnovers this season, and the Falcons have been much better on defense in the second half of the season. Definitely not elite, and I certainly prefer the Chiefs, but if you can't get them, the Falcons are a nice consolation prize. So, let's order these guys for waiver priority. So the order for claiming players, which is really all you do at this point because no one cares about where you are for waiver claim after this weekend's. We've got Tyler Higbee 1, then DeAndre Washington, Breshad Perriman, whatever quarterback or defense stream you need, but at this point you should probably have that figured out. Dallas Goedert, then Gus Edwards / Justice Hill, then John Ross, Deebo Samuel, and everyone else. So that'll do it for the final waiver wire video of the season. I'll be doing starts and sits for the running back position tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. That's the end of this one. I hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And if you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.